Right. Oh, Barbara's on as well. Can you
Hi
hear
there,
me, Barbara?
everybody. Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. Right. Good. Um, yeah. I just now said, Barbara, I might have to leave quite quickly because I've got someone who's going to come and look around the house, and that
Oh,
is important at the moment.
yeah, good luck with that, Ronnie.
So, well, yeah, that's getting the pain, that is. Anyway, yeah, I've had a few. We had about 4 new members over Christmas, which was good. You know, new members to us, the charity part. That was quite good. But we've now reached 701 on Facebook, which
Very
is
good.
quite good. That's gone very well. And we're getting some good emails or messages coming in Facebook, which makes it plenty to talk to and plenty to answer and plenty to research. So that's quite good. Yeah, Keith,
Yep.
that yeah, unfortunately, that we're missing out a lot of liberation forms, aren't we? Because
Yeah,
that
they're all
site is
all going through and all being put on. There's somebody now who's going back up to queue to do the last, what he reckons, the last 5 boxes. But basically,
yeah,
they've got about 8 boxes to put on, and another 4 arrived the other day, so that's another 12 going on, and they're being done
yeah,
daily.
yeah. What about the ones off the other site that was closed? Because there's quite a few on there.
I queried that again and said to them, I said to Paul, can you just make sure that everything was on that old site is now on the new site? So I'm waiting for him to come back to me on that one.
Yeah, yeah, because there was, if I couldn't find a liberation form on your Kofipo proper site, I used to use the other one, and I found a lot more liberation forms on there than were on your
Mm.
site, which is now going. So that would have been nice, really, for them to have kept it going until they got all those forms over. Because at the moment I get stuck now because I can't tell people what camps they're in, and that's not just for the Roll of Honour, because the Roll of Honour is actually on the Kofipo site, so it's affecting everyone. It's not just affecting the Fipo family. It's because they use all my sites through their portal, don't they?
Well, all I can
Keith?
suggest, Ronnie, is if you find you haven't got a liberation questionnaire on there, I'm up at queue each Saturday. Just ask.
Yeah, but I do a lot of them, Keith. That would have been nice just to go into the program and take them off. Seems a bit silly to take the program off if
I must admit, I was told they'd all been done. So
they
obviously
haven't been done.
So right, okay,
They
right.
haven't. Yeah.
I'll chase
I
Paul
can
up
get.
on that.
I can. I tried to get back into Wayback, which is archive. That archives the old programs, but of course the database that doesn't archive. So the database with the liberation forms on, you can't pick up even on Wayback. So you know what Wayback is. It archives all websites from about 10 years ago. So it is quite handy, but that doesn't do database. So of course we don't get the liberation form. The thing is, Keith, I do about I suppose 10 to 20 pages a week for people, and it does hinder when you can't get in and get the liberation forms. I mean, that's I can understand them putting them on to a new database, but really they should have left the old site up and running until they did it, because otherwise and then as I say, that's just not affecting our site, Fipo Family or Roll of Honour, because it's on their site as a portal, so it is affecting everyone. That was just a little moon, Keith. If you can have a little moon your end.
Yep.
Because that seems silly to me. When I transfer things, I make sure I've transferred everything before I take the old one off. That's the logical way to do it, I would have thought. Anyway, that's my moon. Uh, uh, right. Oh, we've got Tim on as well. Can you hear us, Tim? No, I'll turn your sound on. Just a minute. Can you hear me,
Can
Tim?
you hear me all right?
Yeah, I got you now. Yeah,
Right.
your sound was off.
Yeah, no, I was listening to you earlier, but I've got no camera for some reason.
Oh, yeah. We were just saying that, whenever Windows do an update, you always lose something. And last time I lost my camera, and I still haven't got it back on my main computer. The camera's gone, and I can get it normally, but I can't get it on Blue Jeans. So this is my laptop. Anyway, right, Keith, have you got anything important to say? I've moaned at you, so you can say what you like.
It's just going through bits and pieces at Q still, looking for obviously do with the Canadian thing for them. Coming across a few interesting bits. One of them was related to escape parties. How these 8 guys survived 2 mock executions, I will never know that they did. But they say there was from the Calder Harbour battery. I've got to look up exactly where that was. But I've got an idea where it was. There were 68 escapees. Now this little group was just 8 men, and they all survived. 2 of them died on the railway, but the others seem to have survived. But he's done a report on it, so I think, well, next week when I go back, I'll try and photograph the report and type it up.
Yeah, if you can send us a copy, and then I can add it, because I've got escapes on the Roll of Honour.
Yep.
So I can add it in the database for that, and then we can put it on. If you notice, whenever somebody helps with a website, I always put in the information that name. So they do get recognised. I don't take for myself. If somebody gives me anything, it always goes in the information so people know where the information comes from. Okay, so it's not just for me, it's for everyone. Right, so if you can, Keith, send us a copy of that, and then I can add it into the database, and that will go on the escapes. Right, Barbara, we haven't heard from you for a long time.
I'm very busy, plus the last meeting I was fortunate enough to go to Lisbon as a late birthday present, so I'm glad to be back with you. Been watching everything that's going on, particularly at the moment, watching what Ray Withnell and David Sartin are up to.
Yeah, that's very good.
That's excellent. Can't wait to hear, what else they've found, especially about the SOEs that they've been looking into. I must admit, when we were in Kuala Lumpur some years back, I didn't even realise that there was much there to do with the FIPOs. So, so it's interesting to catch up on that. I have to say that Keith has done some really interesting things for one of the members of Bar FIPO. Edwin Coy is the father of Ken Coy, our vice chairman. And Keith found some really interesting things to do with a post-war trial, which Keith may be able to tell us more about. And that was fascinating. Apart from that, not a lot really going on. Busy with my mum, who's got dementia, and I think it's catching because I keep forgetting things, but there you go. And it's nice to have been able to catch up with Keith more lately as well. In our own group in Birmingham. And it's great to have him back with us. I don't know whether Keith, we did a small service on Tuesday at the St Martin's in the Bullring, and one of the prayers I'd chosen off the FIPO site was a prayer by Mary Michael, and it brought an instant reaction from Keith, and apparently Keith is still in touch with Mary Michael in the States. And I think what she says is a heading to the prayer that we used, which was a soldier's final remembrance. and it says, "Let their memory survive forever within us, still alive." Is counting very much at the moment because Ronnie, you were saying that lots of members, up to 700 now. I think it's been amazing this week to see how many people are recording memories for their grandparents, and that's what we really, really need, is to see the next generation stepping up now, because we may not be around to keep this memory going. So, that's about all really. Hopefully Keith perhaps can fill us in on about Edwin Coy as well. So I'll shut up now. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
We'll carry on.
Yeah, I got it. If you have a look, Barbara, if you have a look on the Roll of Honour under Site Memorial, John, I don't know how you pronounce his name, but John Forgione, that's Forgione, is Mary's father.
Yeah,
right.
John Forgione.
And if you have a look down the page, I put his page on because I get it from Mary as well. If you go down, she sent me loads and loads of poems.
Yeah.
And if you have a look right down the bottom, that's more poetry by Mary. And that is a lot of the poems she sent me. There's 2, 4, 6, 8. There's 9 there, and one on the other page. So there's 10 poems. She used to write me loads of poems because how it started. Well, it didn't. She was in the feeble community years ago, but Alistair Urquhart went over to States to see the submarine that sunk the ship, and she was in touch with Alistair, and she took him round the submarine to see the submarine that sunk the ship and everything, and so she started sending me these poems. So that's, if you have a look, some of them are very good. And she did write one, the candle, because I always keep the candle burning. That's one of my things. So she wrote me one, light a candle upon this Christmas day, and for all peoples a little prayer to say, light a candle in their name and cherish their memory without the flame. Light a candle for us to share and show others how much we do care. Light a candle this time of year to honour the men with a quietly shed tear. Light a candle upon Christmas Day so we may all join together in this very special way. She writes some nice poems. And another one who used to send me loads of poems, and I got about 100, was Reg. He was
Reg Rayner.
He used to send me loads and loads of poems by his wife, and I put a load of them on. But Reg was a very, very good mate. Very sad to go to his funeral. It was, he really did help me. My dad died 2001, and I got very friendly with Reg, and he did help me organise the one you came to, Keith, at Greymouth. He brought a lot of people with him, if you remember.
Yep.
Very nice chap. So sad. Yeah. He was like, when Dad died, he was like a father to me. He was really good. Anyway, let's get on. Next one. Kevin, I'm going along the bottom, so I'll do Kevin. I'll go along the bottom and I'll do it that way. Kevin, have you got anything new to say?
Yeah, you have. Well, first of all, thanks, Ronnie, for putting the REOC rule documents on. That was brilliant. That for me, I found quite a bit of information because I've been working on a roll call for my dad's company, which is the ZAOW. So I've actually finally finished that one off. But I come across actually quite interesting thing. I mean, remember years ago, can you remember the television presenter, John Craven?
Yeah.
Well, his father was in the RAOC. And he actually turns out he was actually in the same unit as my father. So that was quite interesting to find out. Yeah, so that's going to go into my website eventually. I've got that down, and I'll have to put that into the website. And also, I'd like to thank you for Royal Northumberland Fusiliers one's on as well, because my uncle was in that. He was captured in Singapore, so that was quite interesting as well. So I've been doing quite a lot of bits and pieces.
Yeah, those pages, what I do with them, Kevin, is I put them into a database so it's easy to find. And I don't know what program you use for your web page, but my one, I can actually introduce things from my database into my web page without typing out everything again. So I set it all up so it links to my database, and it actually puts the information from my database in the fields which I've just put in. So I get every piece of information put in. It saves a lot of time, but the first thing is building the database, which does take time. But once you've done that, it's dead easy. With mine, just a hint, and I've done it myself, is if you build a database and add the fields in a web page, and then you add another field into your original database, everything comes out wrong. So you've got to be ever so careful, get everything in your database before you start using all the fields. Get all the fields in the right order and everything before you start using it, because otherwise you'll get yourself in a hell of a mess. I have in the past, but just a little tip. But databases are very good, and they save a lot of typing. If you just set up the database, because I use NetFusion. I don't know what you use.
I use actually the Microsoft, the Microsoft one to do it free. It's called Expressions. It's actually free. You can download it from the Microsoft website.
Well, you can download the first versions of NetFusion now, and they do have the database, but of course we're now up to NetFusion 15, I think, and I started with NetFusion 2, which is about 20 years ago. So that they have come on. There's a lot more come on. There's a lot more things you can do with the NetFusion now.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to do much more with it now, because they've stuck on this last version now for a good year and a half. Well, normally they do one every 6 months to a year, so I think they're going to stick with this one. Databases are hard to set up at the beginning, but they do save a hell of a lot of time later on.
Yeah, for search and stuff. There's something else I'm going to ask you, Ron.
Yeah.
You know, on the documents, to have the abbreviations like overland. Well, it's OVL. Is there a key?
It's overland and oversea.
Overseas.
Overland and oversea.
Like abbreviations, is there anywhere where there's a list of them abbreviations to what actually means some of them?
Sometimes they do put abbreviations right on the very first page, of the document of the file, so you can get the. But some of it is just working it out. I mean, like Keith. I mean, M is normally, if they're not talking about the overland trip to journey, if they're not talking about the M group, M is normally missing. So in a lot of files you'll come across M or D. So M is missing and D is dead. So you have to just work it out really. But a lot of the files are different. So you might look at one batch of files and the abbreviations are different when you get to another. That just all depends on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought that file mainly I got that for John, but of course in our last meeting John was interested in the file form, so I managed to download it all. At the moment, I'm in the middle of converting, because when you look in Find Your Past, the files they're quoting for index cards, there's about 52, I think.
58.
Different 58. Well, they don't tell you what letters they begin and what letters they end with. So I'm in the middle of writing that out now. So
have you not got a copy of that, Ronnie? I did a list years ago. I sent you a
of
copy.
the names.
Yeah,
the thing
box
is,
numbers and the names.
No. What, to and from?
Yeah.
No, I ain't seen one from you, Keith.
We're going back a long time.
But I've found out, though, that they keep adding to them, don't they, Keith? So I've found out that they're overlapping some of the names. So not other than that, some of the names are in the wrong group. So it's awkward. They haven't kept the names in the right order.
No, that's fine. My past all over.
You get to D Costa, D-Costa, and then in the next one that ends up with Dixon, and then the next one it's De Oliveira, which should have been in the other file. It's really, they haven't really thought about it. They haven't spent a lot of time in where they're going to put things. I think they're just putting them in a gap. I think that's all they're doing.
No, there was three of us at Q yesterday having a moan about Ancestry and Find My Past and all the rest of it. And there's stuff, you're assuming that when they do these boxes, they photograph the lot, which they should do. Well, I wouldn't like to put any money on it. Yeah, that was the list.
Keep fine. Yeah.
So that years ago.
I ain't seen that.
I'll see if I can find a copy. Send that to you. That's the list I got from Q.
Up to 25 now, so don't bother because I'm halfway there now. So that's what I'm doing now. Right. John.
Yeah.
John.
Yes.
We had a word earlier, just the two of us. Do you want to talk to the group?
Yes. At our last meeting, we I don't know if you've all seen the letter that Ronnie's put on the Heroes page with regards to Major Outwin, who was on the Empress of Asia with my father. My father was a driver for him. He was a lieutenant in the REME. My father was RAOC. They both got over the side of the Empress of Asia. They were separated, and David Outwin, I think his name's David, is so many names now. David, he escaped and sent a letter to his mother in 1943, I think, or thereabouts, detailing the escape. And it's a brilliant letter. If you can look on the website. Fantastic.
Yeah, I put it under. I can't remember what I put.
Barriston
Did I put it under my letter home? Was that what I called it?
No, I think you put Douglas escapes from Singapore.
That's actually very good, and that's a good letter because he couldn't post it abroad because he was in Colombo, wasn't he? Colombo.
That's right.
He said he couldn't post abroad, so he gave it to somebody to post when they got back to Britain, because if they'd have posted it abroad, that'd been censored, so all the stuff he'd put in, we wouldn't have seen.
No,
So it actually is a good letter because you get everything. He tells you what she had, didn't he?
he did.
That's
I
very
spoke.
good.
I sent it. I sent a letter to. I sent an email to his son, and he was delighted with the way that it was presented and the way it was in that letter as well to his mother. He apologises for the grammar at the end of the letter that
Yeah.
his grammar is not as it ought to be. So that was amusing. But it's a really powerful letter.
Yeah, I had one during the week, John. I had one during the week, and they asked me if I could put some bits together for them, and the name was Mac Elvin. And I kept on trying to find all the details on him, and he spelt it McElven from Northern Ireland. And I started finding little bits of information. I think I found about 4 files on McElven, and then I started thinking, well, his index card and various other bits I can't get. So then I started looking through the alternatives, and I ended up to get his index card McIlven. Whoever wrote it out, so I got in touch with him and said, well, I've had a job, that's all on there now, blah, 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 and that's, you can see it and everything. He thanked me for everything, but then he said, of course, our family weren't educated, so they spelt the name different ways. So he said it was natural because they weren't well educated. They just put down what they thought. So there's loads of files on there, all spelt different ways. That's really strange. Sorry to butt in, John.
No, that's fine. That's
yeah.
I mean, we did ask for photographs, but he hasn't got any photographs of him in uniform. And later on, he says that his father was mostly behind the camera, as most of us were in the 70s and 80s before smartphones came along.
Yeah, but
So
any photo, I tend to put any photo on, really.
Yeah.
So if they haven't got one on uniform, I'll just put one on. So if he has
I've asked
got
him
one,
to dig one out, yeah.
yeah, any photo, just, I always think if you've got a picture of somebody,
Yeah.
it all falls in. So what they're saying, you got on the photo. So, yeah. But that was interesting. Thanks, John, for sending me that. That was very good. Appreciate it.
And as I get any more now on him, I'll send it on to you. I mean,
Yeah, and then I can add it on. I think I did put. No, I didn't put a page in. I don't think I put a page in the Roll of Honor for him, did I? Oh, I did, and I put a link to the Far Eastern Heroes. So that all came in together. So it can be added either in Far Eastern Heroes or his actual Roll of Honor page.
going off that slightly, I saw a post yesterday on the Facebook with regards to somebody who was captured in Singapore and was in Thompson Road, a prisoner in Thompson Road, and my father was there. How big was that camp?
Well, I've come across the food Thompson Road. Have you, Keith?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it was that big.
They weren't huge. No, they weren't a huge camp, but there was quite. I don't know how many POWs were there. Got no idea. I'll try and find out for you, John.
Hold on.
Okay.
While you're looking, Keith, Martin,
Hello?
we haven't talked to you yet, have we?
No, not yet. No.
No? Come on then, Martin. Tell us how you got on, because you went to Thailand, didn't you?
No, I went up to Singapore as a guest. Yeah, I was invited up there by Channel News Asia, which was pretty amazing. They yeah, they took me up to, or paid for all my expenses to get up to Singapore and to take part in a short part of a documentary piece they're doing on Singapore through the ages for the bicentenary. So it's a 3-part series on Singapore, through the ages, and the part I'm involved with is the episode that covers the Japanese invasion, the Japanese occupation. And initially they'd contacted John Cooper to see if he'd be interested in coming over, and John wasn't able to, so he essentially put them on to me. So they contacted me, and they'd picked up the Hill 105 report that I wrote, and it's on John's webpage, and they'd had a look at that, and off the back of that, they said, yeah, we'd like you to come up and do this filming segment with us. And so I got back to them and said, yeah, look, yeah, it'd be great. I just said, providing that you can organise all the appropriate permissions and stuff, it's all going to be obviously covered on media and TV and so forth. So they worked through all of that, got all the permissions granted and sorted out, and so I flew up on a Thursday night, and we started. Next day, we all met up on the hill and had a bit of a recce and a bit of a look around, and it was the young producer, a young Indian girl, and her partner, who was sort of looking after production, just were fantastic and really, really interested in the story. So what they wanted to do was try and put together a story which was different to what they'd actually had coverage for in Singapore. So Hill 105 really hasn't had a lot of exposure in the past, hasn't actually been written about to any great extent in the past, and so they wanted to connect a family story with it. So my grandfather was Bedson Hart's HQ company, which we know were on Hill 80, which is the hill behind Hill 105. But his cousin, Sergeant William White, was C Company, and he wrote a diary of his war, and so he covered quite a fair bit on the events at Hill 105, and that was the part they were really interested in. So they set about a filming plan, which obviously this is going to be very media, of course. So they set about a filming plan, and so they wanted to sort of tell the story of how I'd come to sort of trace family footsteps and et cetera. So some of the filming's probably a little bit media, a little bit corny, a lot of reflective sort of type scenes and shots. So how they're going to build and tell the story, I'm not quite sure yet, and they probably won't tell the story exactly how I'd like to have told it. So that'd be interesting to see how it all comes together. But what was really, really good was that they got permission for us to do a dig on the hill, and so with some hand-drawn maps that we'd got from Bedford Archive that actually shows the positions of where the guys dug in and so forth. We went for a bit of a traipse through the jungle area of the hill and did a bit of metal detecting, and yeah, it was just fantastic to actually bring some stuff up live for the camera. So we found some mortar fuse fragment and an Arasaka round and an Indian 1926 Indian coin, a square coin. So it was really, really, really exciting for them that we actually produced some stuff live on camera for their piece. So then after that, so that was, I had to be on set at 7:30 in the morning on the Saturday, so that's when we did all the filming. So that went on to about 3:30 in the afternoon. So it was a pretty intense, full-on day. And then we went to a location where they carried out an interview, which that went on for about 2 hours. It was more like an interrogation than an interview. So out of the whole day and the amount of filming they did and the amount of interviewing they did, the segment they're going to put together is about 5 to 8 minutes. So it's an amazing amount of filming and interview time to extract that. So it'd be interesting to see what they actually produce at the end of the day, because like I say, I'm a little bit apprehensive, because when you're sitting there with a camera in your face all the time, it's a little bit unnervy. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it all comes up.
Are they going to send you a copy?
Well, I hope so. As far as I know, it's going to air in Singapore in April, and it'll probably get broadcast across the region that CNA cover. So it probably may even get into Thailand. Don't know yet. But yeah, certainly I've said can I have a copy when it's aired, and they said yeah, no problem. But if not, I'll actually keep an eye on their scheduling to see when they are actually going to show it, and see if I can get someone in Singapore to record it anyway. But yeah, it'd be good to get a copy of it.
Is it going to be in English or what?
Yeah, no, it's all English. Absolutely, yeah. Singapore's
good.
totally English speaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, the whole production's done in English, of course. Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. Never done anything like this before, so it was a little bit daunting, to say the least.
I'll say this before I go, because I don't know when they're going to come, these people. But have any of you been into the National Archives of Singapore?
Yes, before it moved. It's now relocated. I went to the old one.
This new one is excellent. That really is good. I mean, you've got to be careful how you get through things, but they've got so many interviews on there, pictures on there. I came across it during the week. I'd seen it before, but not in this format. It's very detailed. If you put a search in the right up the top on the right, that'll come up with whatever you want to know about it, and that's ever so good. It's if any of you want to have a look, it's www.nas.gov.sg. So it's what it stands for is National Archives of Singapore.government.sg Singapore. It is really, really good. There's so much on there that really did surprise me. How there's a lot of interviews with POWs. It is really, really good. I was very surprised because I've seen it before and it wasn't much at all, but now it is very, very good. So it's worth looking at. Right, we've done John, we've done Kevin, done Martin, done Barbara. I think we've been through everyone. Right, so I'll open it to everyone now.
Tim's there as well.
Tim.
I'm hiding.
Oh, I didn't see Tim. It's Tim, yeah, you're right in the picture. Right, Tim,
I'm
go on
hiding.
then, mate. Are you in your caravan at home? Are you in your boat or at home?
No, I'm at home. I'll be getting to the boat,
yeah,
I suppose.
I couldn't see
End
the
of next
boat
month,
window
I
behind
suppose.
you. Yeah, we'll be.
No.
Well, we're going to have a break. We're going to get down towards the beginning of March because we're so fed up, with everything that's going on. We're really cheesed off. So we've got some of our static caravan up North Norfolk. But I went and collected some of the furniture because we'd sold all our furniture. We got rid of it all. Sold it. We got rid of it next to nothing because the park home is going to be fully furnished. So we cleared out everything, and we didn't have anything to even eat off of. So I went up North Norfolk and brought some back. So we got a table and chairs, which is good because we're sitting on the floor. Right. Go on then, Tim.
I really don't know what I've got to say. Oh, I've got I did send you an email saying Steve James, who, for anyone else who doesn't know, Steve James's father was George James, who wrote the article on hell ships, which Ronnie's got on the website or has had for ages. His father and my father were together, and Steve's got his dad's diary, which he hasn't really done anything about much for ages, but it's now at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford, being very slowly preserved. It was rolled up as it had been and was disintegrating, but Duxford have got it. They've got it flat, and you can read some of it, and they're now sort of whatever the opposite of dehumidifying is, humidifying, I suppose. But they're a bit worried about how they do it because they're frightened if they just put water in, some of the writing's going to sort of disappear. So, but anyway, Duxford seem to be very keen on it and seem to be doing all the right things, and they've had it for months. So hopefully some information will come out of that, which will be very interesting because.
Yeah. I think George was well educated, wasn't he? And so what he wrote was well done.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, what Steve's seen so far, it's mentioned my dad a couple of times, and actually in lists, one of which was the list of the officers which were at Tanjong Priok, which actually is very interesting because it shows where my dad was exactly at the time. It's also interesting with who's not on the list, who turned up later, as to where they were actually captured. And then when they were in Japan, my dad was transferred from Ubi to Sensuji. And Mansell said that Colonel Scott and 6 other officers were transferred. I've always been able to find out Colonel Scott and 5 officers, but one officer eluded me. But thanks to Steve and his dad, I've now got a list which has found the missing officer. So I'm quite happy at the moment the way things are going.
I can't remember when I wrote your dad's role in the Roll of Honour. Did he go on the Singapore Maru with George?
Yes, he did. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
No, he was definitely on the Singapore Maru, and the only bit I'm really missing at the moment is because what actually happened was the regiment was in Singapore, and my dad was in 78 Battery, and Steve James's dad was the troop commander of B Troop of 89 Battery. 78 Battery and B Troop moved from Singapore to Penambang, to the oil fields and the 2 airfields, P1 and P2 there. And that between there and the rest of Java, I've really got a bit of a gap, which I'm trying to fill in. I mean, it's actually sort of almost pre-capture rather than, because once they were captured, there seems to be quite a lot of information about him. So difficult.
I found Steve was, when he sent me all the details, that was quite a few years ago now, wasn't it, Tim?
Yes.
He was ever so good about it because, I mean, that was his dad. His dad, of course, was dead at the time. And he sent me all the information on the Singapore Maru. And that is excellent. The Singapore, he explains the journey and what they had to put up with on the journey. And that was one of those stories when you put it together and you think, Christ, I'm glad I weren't on that. It was really hell. You can't imagine it, the smell, the stench, and they were on there for a long time to get to Japan. That was a long journey.
I think I remember. I sent you some time ago, and you actually put it on the Singapore Maru site, the report of the Australian medical officer who went on board
yeah.
at Moji, and I think that's the one that's actually really tells you how horrible it really was when he's going.
I mean, most of it I take it, I've read it, but I was reading one about one of the ships the Americans were on, and it was pitch dark, and they could hear people calling about drinking blood from other prisoners. Horrible. You just can't imagine it. You just can't imagine it. Things like that you can't put on the net. You just can't put things like that on the net. People, no, but that is horrible. But the journey must have been. I mean, you can't imagine it. I mean, how many died? Oh, haven't got the. It was.
Well, it was.
There was quite.
It was. I think it was about 60 or 70 died, but there was one heck of a lot died shortly after they got there. They had to leave.
Yeah.
I think they left 200 on the ship.
They left. They put them into an isolation hospital.
They put some of them into an isolation.
Yeah.
They put some of them into an isolation hospital, but some were. I mean, when the mobile ones, for want of a better word, left the ship, I think about 700 out of 1,000 got off. There was 200 something were actually just left on the ship as completely immobile, and they were the ones that had to be rescued. But a lot of them died, of course. There's a letter on the Kofipo website. There's a letter from Lieutenant Cross from his father, who was also in my dad's regiment, and he went and I think he must have been ill because he went to he didn't go off. He stayed in Moji, and he says he was put on a lorry, and he said by the time they reached the hospital there were only 2 alive on the lorry. Him and one other. Which, I mean, the other thing, of course, which always occurs to me, which you don't often seem to see, is because it was Singapore and everyone, thinks of the tropics, they don't realise that once you got to Japan, even when, Dad was in the prison camps, how cold it got during the winter. And certainly when they got to Moji off of Singapore Baru, one of the problems was that they're all just in their tropical kit and it was freezing cold.
Yeah. I thought that was bad, but then I came across the Maros Baru, M-A-R-O-S.
Maros Baru.
Somebody asked me to look into a relation, and I came across that, and I started putting the database together, and 650 POWs and 372 died. The ship was an old ship that was going from Ambon back to Japan, back to Java, and that was an old ship, and that ran into trouble. The first ship that left Ambon. That's really horrible when you read it. And when they got to, I can't pronounce it, Makassar.
Yep.
Yes, didn't the engines break down?
Makassar.
Yep.
Yeah, the engines broke down, and they had to stay in the harbour till they had it repaired. And they were still dying on board because they didn't let them ashore, so they were still dying on board, and they just put them all to the side. A lot of the POWs couldn't get down below, so the whole journey they had to stay on the deck, and the weather was very bad. This is where a lot of them died. And so they got into the harbour. They had to have the repairs done, and so they were stuck on the ship, and so they were just putting the dead over the side. And one of the reports I read was that was horrible, sitting on the deck and watching the bodies floating around in the harbour. Oh, gee, how can you imagine that? When I first come across it, I thought that must have sunk until you start reading about it. And there was 305 British, and the rest were Dutch who died. Horrible, really horrible. So that wasn't even a sinking, and yet you're talking about 375 lives. Anyway, so I think Gillian's calling me. Can I leave you all? Keith, can I ask you to take over the meeting, Keith?
Okay.
Yeah, can you
He got to sleep.
I've got to
No,
go
no,
because,
no.
well, no, and when, because you haven't got very much longer now, so when you finish, can you stop record, Keith?
Yep. It's a little button up there. I can
And
see
then
it
I'll
flashing.
put it on for everyone to read. Yeah, and then I'll put it on for everyone to read. Thank you all. That really is nice to see so many turn up for a meeting, because we've only had 2s and 3s. So if we can try and entice other members to come on, that would be handy. You know, the more people we have on, the more we can go through. I mean, that's flown. The last start has flown because we've had so much going on. So if we can get more people, yeah.
Yep.
Can
Okay.
I all say, I'm going to go. I won't bring in here.
Thanks very
See
much,
you all
Ronnie.
later.
Yeah.
All the best.
Bye.
See you later. Good luck.
Thanks.
Bye.
Right.
Over to you.
Yeah. Well, I think we've probably gone through most of what Ronnie normally does. Just interesting that everybody's doing different projects and finding out so much. You know, that's one of the good things about it.
I've got something for you, Keith, when you've got absolutely nothing better to do.
Right.
I'm informed that you have, in fact, actually, I think you said it at one of the meetings, you've got all Brian Green's papers on
Yes.
Sumatra and Java,
Yep.
which I will be very interesting to hear, you know, some of the stories when you get round to it.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit they are going to, or have got to be catalogued and put into the archive at the Arboretum, but they are still here.
Oh,
It's
right.
one of these jobs I've still got to do. But yeah, what regiment was your father in?
35th Light Anti-Aircraft,
Right. Okay.
which they arrived in Singapore on the 13th of January. And then at the end of January, they moved to Sumatra, as I said, to defend the airfields and the oil refineries. And then they, you know, everything went wrong, pear-shaped. And,
That's
but I've read
21st.
Pat Walker's book, so, you know, on the 6th, they were actually attached to 6 Heavy
Right.
at the time, you know, so, and I've talked to Pat Walker quite a lot, but he's got no more information. But,
Right. Okay. That's 21st Light Anti-Aircraft.
no, 35th.
35th. Oh, 35th. Oh, I got you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
35th was in the Singapore, but I think
Yeah.
21st actually only arrived in Java. It went direct to Java, I think, the 21st.
Yeah, because was it one? It was one battery, one troop went from Singapore to Java, wasn't it?
Yeah, from Singapore, the 35th, yeah. 78 battery and one, and B troop of the 89th.
Yes, that's the one where somebody published an article called "Gunners in Java," and he got the whole battery as being sunk and only one survivor, which wasn't true.
It was the other way round.
That's the Royal Artillery. So,
yeah, it was the other way about.
Yeah, but the trouble is you can't.
That actually was the other 2 troops of 89 battery. That wasn't the first lot to go over. That was A and C batteries of 89th who got sunk. But and of course they lost all their guns when they got sunk. But Dad's lot, they actually got all their transport and guns into Sumatra, all right.
Oh, right.
But they were just short on ammunition. That was the problem, and they had to borrow some. Well, I say borrow. I don't think it was borrow. I think it was they got some off the Dutch, but it wasn't quite the same as the British ammunition. I'm not too sure whether it was the fuses or what. I mean, obviously fitted the guns all right, but it didn't explode quite the same way as the British ammunition.
Yeah, I'll have a look. I'll have a look through his papers and see if he's got anything on the 35th.
Mm.
I'll be
Well,
very surprised if he hasn't. Let's put it that way.
yeah. Well, the war diary, I've got the war diary, but the war diary unfortunately ends on the 31st of January. So they must actually have got the war diaries out of Singapore, because I know a lot of the regiments, the war diaries don't exist.
Some of them,
You
I
know,
mean,
all,
the Coast Guard regiments, for argument's sake, they were all written up in Changi
yes, but
and
but
buried. But
the 35th definitely got out of Singapore, because it's they're all signed by Colonel Bassett, and Colonel Bassett was
Bassett
the
was on
leader of
Ballalo,
the
wasn't he?
600 gunners,
That's right.
so, and was killed. So his couldn't have been written up afterwards. You know,
No.
it must have been, you know, got out of Singapore by somebody.
Either that or somebody buried it and recovered it after the war. Could have been.
Well, could
You know,
have,
I mean,
yes.
it's the East Surrey's war. They've got a very comprehensive war diary, but I think that was written up after the surrender, and you had a bit added after the Japanese surrender in September. The 135th is exactly the same. You get the war diary written up at the time, and then Colonel Toosey put a bit on at the end, and that was filed in the wrong file at Kew. But, yeah, it was in the 155th file. So I was looking at that. I was looking for it for. I wanted to see how far the 155th file went, and as you say, a lot of them didn't go past January. And I thought, oh, okay. And then there was another envelope in the file, and what got my attention was somebody had altered. I couldn't see the number underneath, but they altered it to a 5 in a blue crayon sort of thing. I thought, oh, I wonder what that is. And I pulled it out, expecting to get the 155th, and they were at the sharp end from day one. And this started reading, oh, we arrived in Singapore in January. What? And it was the 135th. It had been put in the wrong file. So that's now in a file of its own. But yeah, as you say, it's pretty hit and miss with war diaries.
That's actually why, you know, I'm hoping that Steve James's dad's diary is going to enlighten us, because he was a religious diary keeper. In fact, I've got a copy of a war crimes report that my father did to, I think it was Oxfordshire Constabulary after the war, and he actually says there that, you know, suggest you contact Lieutenant James, because he kept a meticulous diary of events. So,
well, I hope they can preserve it.
Yeah, so do
I hope they can preserve it.
I think they're trying really hard.
Yeah, that's the trouble, is when it's very, very old paper.
Well,
and it may be that
cheap and nasty paper as well, I expect.
Yeah, I would imagine it's probably all they can get hold of. But if you look at, I forget the file number. I know it's WO32, and it's got Lieutenant Colonel Toosey's report. Well, it's one of a number of copies, but the copies are on far better paper. But this is on original paper. It's going brown. I've managed to get somebody to take it out of the general file and put it in a little file of its own, which they did for me, thankfully. But you could just go like that. The paper is friable. It's too far gone now. I would have thought they'd be able to do anything about it, but hopefully, with Duxford, you've got people that are probably trained in the art of preservation.
Yeah.
Because there's a change come over the National Archives at Kew, and it's not the place I used to go to. I've been going there for 20 years now, and all of the people that really cared about anything have gone. You know, we've got one person still in the reading room, Julie. She's been there for as long as I've been going there, and she is passionate about her job. But the others, they're just there to draw salary. That's it. But they're not too fussy about how they digitise stuff. Talking to one of the medal guys, and he said there's one particular report, and he said I'd actually copied it myself, So I'm going through this report on, I think it was Find My Past, and there's a big gap. So you mentioned it's the archives, and you do realise there's a very big gap. There's 40 pages missing. Are you going to digitise it? We might do. They never bothered.
Mm.
So anybody gets hold of that file now, there's 40 pages missing, unless they've seen it originally, they would never know. So
That's similar to I've been doing a fair bit of researching on NCAP, the aerial photography website. Yeah, there's actually a lot of photographs on there. You just need to know how to find them. But the problem is they're only putting up a handful of photos from a various run. So you can get a couple of useful ones, but then you want others, and then of course you've got to go either you've got to pay for a researcher to find them, or you've actually got to go in there yourself and organise a search. So it starts to get fairly costly. But what I've discovered is that a lot of people have advertised this on Facebook pages, and the obvious ones are, people search Kanchanaburi, etc., and you pick up the prison camp at Tamarkan, etc. But there's a whole heap more on there. You just need to actually know how to search for it. And one of the keys to it has been recently getting the maps from Trove, which are the 1945 British Survey maps of the railway of Thailand and of Burma, which actually shows the railway itself. And if you start picking up the original regions, the Thai spelling, and start searching by localities, like Khao Lem and using keywords like Ban or Ta or Khao, you start to actually bring up railway photographs, and it's quite amazing what's in there. A little trick that I've learned is that for £20 you can pay for a zoom function, and you can actually zoom in onto some of these photos and see some pretty amazing detail in there. So it's kept me occupied for several weeks now, just rummaging around. So I sort of reached the point now where I've probably discovered most of what's available. But then it's sort of like that intrigue now. Oh, if I had the next photo on, or if I had the next photo on from that, it would identify a great deal more, because some of them, it's running up one side of the river, and my area of focus in Thailand is Tarkanun to Karang Krai is the area that I really focus on the most. And there's some Tarkanun photos in there, but it's only just got part of the POW camp on one side of the river. So if you had the next couple in the series, you'd actually pick up a great deal more and start to see some of those other camps. Because some of the what I've noticed also is it depends on what dates they are, because I know Rod's got majority of them, but some of the photos I've actually found are not some are actually different to the ones that Rod's got, because they're obviously different time that this sortie went out and took the series of photos. So that's been pretty fascinating, and great from researching camp locations. One of the biggest problems, of course, is that a lot of the working camps in 1943 were once the Working Party finished that section of railway, etc. Most of those camps were abandoned, and then base camps were actually then the main base camps were the ones that remained, like with the base hospitals, and like for example at Tarkanun, the base camp 206 camp, which is where Major Pemberton was, and 2,000 or 3,000 POWs. That's a pretty major site, and they suffered the major cholera outbreak, and they had to split the camp into two. And Hardy was there, and he talks about it in his book. But you can't find it in the aerial photographs, because by the time the reconnaissance flights were going over, of course, it was all overgrown. But the camp that you do see is the one which is across the river from Tarkanun village, which is Tarkanun today. Which is also not the original work camp, because that's the new but so that's where the base camp relocated to. Once the work camp closed, they moved the base camp back down to where the 203 work camp was, but not on exactly the same site as the 203. It was actually a little bit further to the south. So it's been pretty interesting stuff for locating these locations. And of course, the only way to really pinpoint them, of course, is once you do the research, is to get out on the ground and hit it with a metal detector and see what you bring up and see what evidence is there. And that's been pretty exciting stuff over the last 18 months or so.
That's what NCAP, is that the one outfit in Glasgow?
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But like I say, if you start using some search words, some keywords, it's amazing what it brings up. It's some pretty and what amazes me is some of the infrastructure at some of these camps is amazing. Some of there's a camp up at Timonka, which is just incredible. The infrastructure, you can see roads and road bridges and the railway sidings, and it's just it's incredible infrastructure.
It's like my father has got in his papers, when I sorted them out after he passed away, there are 3 photos of a POW camp, but it's not looking down, it's oblique, looking sideways on, and you can see the prisoners, the details of the huts, the big trench around the camp, which I said to somebody, was this the last camp you were in? Or my father would have been in, which would have been Tackley, and he said, no, he said there was never a trench around that camp. Somebody else looked and said, oh yeah, I know that's so-and-so camp. And I then find out that the guy that said it's so-and-so camp had never been on the railway. So, but it's got a reference, it's got an EA reference, so I've got to try and track that down. Try and find out what camp it is.
But yeah, it's amazing what's out there, isn't it? I saw that on the Facebook page, Descendants of Far East Prison Wars. Trevor Helps put a post up with his father's 1948 album. Have you seen that?
I think so.
Yeah, it's amazing photos in there because he went back in 1948 and got some great photos of Wangpo Camp and Tonkin South and So essentially he's gone back up the line, and it must have been only as far as Nam Tok, so it must have been after they'd actually pulled the line further north, and but he has taken some pretty fantastic photographs what you're looking at is terrain as it was, only 5 years previously. So some pretty incredible photos.
Oh, look at that.
He's done he put 3 photos together in a panoramic, just joined 3 black and white photos together, and it's of Wangpo Station, and some of it's just really good detail when you start having a look.
Well, thanks for that. Well, I'll look at that one. Right, folks. Anybody else got anything else? I don't know whether you know, but there is a move afoot over here that they are trying to get a memorial for the Lisbon Maru up at the National Memorial Arboretum. There's a Chinese film crew that came over here. They're making a documentary about it. If they can, they want to preserve the wreck, or what's left of the wreck, rather like they've done with the Arizona in Pearl Harbor. Put something over the actual wreck to stop it disintegrating any further. What will become of it, I don't know, but they're certainly very, very keen to get this memorial done at the Arboretum. So that was one film crew I had to entertain. The other one was a Japanese film crew who were just a bit shocked, to put it mildly, looking around the FIPO building. Because they're all young and hadn't got a clue what got on. And some of it, obviously, can we have a photo of the video? Can we have a copy of the video? And I said, well, look, I had to try and find out who owns the copyright. And I actually got in touch with the guy who had done all the work on the building. He was a really nice guy. He used to work for the BBC. And he said, when the POWs agreed to do this, the agreement was that it would stay in the building and never be copied. So, right. Sorry, Japanese film crew, you can't have a copy of the video, which is fair enough. You know, that was what the FIPOs wanted. And he agreed to it, and even now it still holds. So, yes, that was 2 film crews. Meeting somebody there on Thursday with some other co-FIPO members who are over from the Singapore Museum. So that should be interesting. Apart from that, it's still going up and down the queue every Saturday and just seeing what's there. Came across a very interesting, first time I've come across one. Marty's probably seen it. A medical form filled in the Philippines. And the guy was a Brit, but it was an Australian Army medical form, because I think the Australians were looking after the British when they got to the Philippines. They'd been repatriated through. And so that was an interesting one. So I took a copy of it, because I don't know whether anybody's seen one before, so I have to have a word with Ronnie and see if we can't put that on the website. But no, apart from that, it's just ploughing on with this Canadian project at the moment and trying to help them. Martin, you could probably tell me, when they awarded a gratuity to the Australian FIPOs, Australia was the last country to do it, wasn't it?
Not 100% sure. Not 100%
I just
sure.
read a book by, I think it's Christina Toomey, and it's about Australian FIPOs where they came home. And there's some stuff in there that absolutely shook me rigid, because I thought the Australians really held their FIPOs in high esteem, but it appeared not.
Yeah, I actually don't know what the timing was, but yeah.
No, I know the Americans were first, Canadians were second. I think we were the third, because there was evidently they were talking about some form of compensation, and the Australian government were dead against it. Certainly after the war, they were very, very against it. They were trying to get money from the assets, Japanese assets held in Australia, and there weren't that many. But no, it was a very interesting read. It's a book that I've got to read again, because it's opened my eyes a bit.
Yeah, right.
But sadly, I don't think now we could ever do one as what happened to the guys when they came back here in the same vein, because there's not that many left anymore.
No. What's the estimate about the number of guys that are left?
I don't know, I'll be honest. I honestly don't know. I think we came across 3 last year that we never knew about.
Oh, that reminds. Can I just say, Keith, you were going to let me know about that one that's fairly local to where I am?
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Sorry, just as a
No. I'll look it up and drop you a note.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
One was local, say the Bromsgrove area, I think that was.
That's right. Yeah.
And there was another 2. Interestingly enough, there was a film crew making a documentary for a channel over here that asked to speak to people who were captured in Shanghai. I didn't know anybody. Margaret Martin of the Java Club did, and put this guy in touch with 3 of them. And one of them came back. I've just seen the email before I came on here, came back to Margaret and said, I wish I hadn't done that. It's opened so many doors that have been closed for years. I really wish I hadn't done that. So Margaret sort of said, we will not be putting people in touch with FIPOs anymore. There are some people that are quite, I won't say happy. It's like I was having a chat, Barbara, with Margaret.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Ron.
Yeah.
And she said to me, well, she had been chatting to her about it. And I said, well, I'm very, very cautious, because yes, I've got lots of paperwork here, and, giving Ken his dad's paperwork is one thing, but saying to Ron, I've discovered this. Have you seen these before? Might be opening doors that have been closed for a fair number of years, and I'm very, very reluctant to do that.
I think a lot of them were affected in later life when they did start to open up, and you do, have reservations about whether, you are opening a can of worms for them. And that's the cruelest thing when they come to the end of their lives, when they've managed to put it to the back of their minds.
Yeah.
But I mean, even just listening to what we've been talking as a descendant of a FIPO, I find it very distressing. And I think you've mentioned it in the past, Keith, when you've done research, you're sometimes very guarded as to what you pass on to the relatives because of causing them so much distress. It isn't an easy thing to cope with. I mean, next year when we're coming up to the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, I hope that, that some of the situations are addressed and it's passed on in an honest way, and the truth is made known to our descendants as to what happened. But how far do you go? What do you keep back from what happened?
That's it. How far do you go? I mean, Ronnie was talking about.
You see this in the like the Facebook pages with some of the comments that people write. There's varying levels of maturity in the way that people handle stuff.
Yes.
So I sometimes look at stuff and go, "Oh, I'm going nowhere near that," because
very true.
It starts to get a little bit controversial or a little bit, or I don't necessarily agree with it. So I think that people that have researched or have a good understanding over a period of time sort of grow that sort of good level of maturity around how delicate some of this information is, and how it can offend or upset people at the same time.
Yeah, but it is important that the truth is told, because Keith, you just mentioned talking to Margaret, and I think you've heard our story of where I lent her an Arthur Lane book, which she then attempted to get a copy of, and we got one with Strath's comments written in, and Strath is saying, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. So even from the books that were written by the FIPOs quite soon after their experiences don't always reflect the truth. The history isn't always accurate. And I think from Margaret's experience, it would be lovely to be able to look out for some of these books that are being sold on that may have some of these comments written in them by the FIPOs, because Strath made quite a few comments about Arthur Lane's inaccuracies in that one book that she'd managed to get hold of. She tried to get another book that was recorded for sailors having annotations, not being in very good condition. And sadly, the book dealer decided to send her a copy that was in good condition without annotations. And these annotations contain a lot of, the truth of, the FIPOs themselves read these books and have written onto them. So, it'd be interesting to see if any more books like this do come up, because I think Strath's comments are very, very likely to contain the truth as opposed to what Arthur Lane unfortunately recorded.
I mean,
no disrespect to Arthur
Lane.
No.
Again, I'm just being little bit careful, because somebody, a well-known Australian author, who I know quite well. I've been exchanging emails for yonks, Lynette Silver, and she had read one of Arthur Lane's books, and she said to me, "Is this guy for real?" Because he's got stuff on here that couldn't possibly have happened.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, yes, he is for real." And he has written, I think the final book he wrote was based on the Percival's Dispatch for the Battle of Malaya and Singapore. So that was quite accurate. There was no exaggerations in that. But some of his own books, I think he did sort of rather exaggerate. And unfortunately, he shouldn't have done it.
He had to make it interesting, didn't he?
Yeah. But when you come home, if you're publishing that book, which is supposedly everybody that was never came home. No, I did warn Margaret, yes, that Arthur sometimes did exaggerate. Yes, it would be nice if there's any more books out there that to have
Yeah,
annotations and to see what the FIPOs say.
yeah,
This is why I'd be really good if this diary is preserved at Duxford, because it's material like that that's worth its weight in gold.
yeah,
Especially if somebody was very, very good at keeping a diary,
yeah.
which was very risky in a prison camp. But no,
And like Martin, what you were saying about the reconnaissance flights going over the camp, it would be useful to know if you could corroborate those flights with any reports from the actual prisoners that were in the camps. Because, I mean, to see a plane going over must have been a big occasion for them. Because, like my dad, who was he wasn't on the railway, he was in Saigon, but his history over in this country had been sound location for planes and working with the searchlight battalions. And as a child, I know he would always, if he heard a plane, would be there looking up, and became part of his life, spotting planes in a way. People were there and looking to see whether they were British planes, Australian planes, American planes, more likely. So you might find some evidence in reports from actual prisoners there, if you're lucky, as to when those flights took place.
Well, they are they are documented what the flight sorted, what dates they took place on. Actually, one of the most exciting things I found recently in one of those aerial photographs is we came across the Japanese transport camp, which was about 204 between the base camp and the lower camp at Tarkanoon. And we went up there with Rod because he wanted to come and have a look. So we went up there with Rod and we was metal detecting, and we found some tent pegs, the proper angle, big long tent pegs. And so we found one, and so Rod's digging it up, and he says, if you take 5 meters that way, and you take 5 meters that way, and metal detect over this, you'll find the other ones. He says I found them at Hintock, exactly the same. And he says you'll find where the tent was pegged out. So we walked and lo and behold, we found 2 more. So we actually from the 3 we could actually identify exactly where that tent stood. And
you're telling us this. You've told us it before, and this is brilliant, because I go back then to the meetings that we have, and I tell them what you've done, and I tell them about the archaeology that you've done. It's brilliant to hear this happening.
This is where it actually gets even more exciting for us,
right.
because going on the NCAP site recently, because Rod showed me the aerial photos he had of the of this place, this site, and his are a little bit grainy and a little bit blurred, and so I went on the NCAP site, and I've actually found the same location, and with the zoom function, zoomed in, and you can see the area where the Japanese camp was a lot clearer in this photo, and I thought, well, I know the lay of the land, so I know that the tents that we located by finding tent pegs was about here, and sort of like lo and behold, guess what I found? Tent. You can see a little tiny apex, in the photograph.
Oh, that's so exciting!
That was pretty amazing. That was pretty amazing to actually
for
find
you.
the tent
That must
pegs.
have been such an experience to actually think, I've been there, stood on that plot of land where that tent was.
And then found it in an aerial photograph. Yeah.
In fact, we're talking about you just the other day because one of our members brought your book in for some of us to have.
Is that James?
That's it, James. Yeah. So we talk about what you do at our meetings. So these meetings that I watch you on when you come on, I often relate what your latest things are. So it's really interesting to hear. Yeah.
Yeah,
so much as Ronnie thinks
the
that,
area I work on.
Yeah, much as Ronnie thinks that these videos there's only a few of us, it's nice to be able to take back to other people and tell them what's going on, especially with the archaeology, because that is so important now to be able to verify, what's is in these books and these stories, for you to be able to go out and say archaeologically I can prove that that's what was there, and that it's brilliant. Thank you. I'm looking
Well,
forward
thank
to
you.
hoping that maybe that film from Singapore you've been doing will. It would be nice to think it could be shown over here, because obviously Singapore was a British territory. Why shouldn't it be shown over here, really?
Yeah, look, it may well do. I don't know how far and wide it will actually get, but yeah, it may do. But it's for the bicentenary of Singapore. It's a 3-part series, so
Yeah.
it may well do.
Oh yeah,
it'd
maybe
be
come
good.
through on the History Channel or something like that.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Anyway, I'm going to say bye-bye to you all, folks, because I need to
Okay.
set off and go and
Yep.
see my mum. So it's been a really interesting meeting. Thank you ever so much.
Okay,
Okay.
Bart. Yep.
All the best. Bye.
Great chat.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
All right, folks. It's what?
Yep.
Nearly 11:30 over here.
Yeah, it's dinner time here.
Yeah, right. So we'll wind the meeting up now, and I'll stop the recording.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Okay.